Hi, my name is Jovita. I was born in Minas Gerais, but I came to Rio de Janeiro at a very young age and have lived in this city ever since. My children are from Rio, Priscila and Vitor. I got married and had 2 children here, Priscila, who would have turned 40 this year, and Vitor, who is about to turn 38. Priscila was a gift from God. It was a difficult pregnancy. I gained a lot of weight. I was very young, 19 years old, and I got rubella during her pregnancy. Everyone wanted me to terminate the pregnancy, which I could have done because of the rubella. The law allowed it. It was very interesting because I had a dream where she spoke to me. I saw that little baby, exactly as she was when she was born, and she said, "I want to be born. I'm okay." Because of that, even though I was not yet 3 months pregnant, I went through with it, and Priscila was born looking exactly like the baby in my dream. So, from the moment she was born, we had a connection. A very strong bond, because I was so impressed by what I had already told everyone. Those big eyes, they looked like little jabuticabas. She was a beautiful dark-skinned baby. Priscila developed well. Everything was fine even after I separated from her father when she was 7. It was a turbulent separation, but we were very close. Me, Priscila, and Vitor, we were always together. I loved camping, traveling. We did a lot of things together. And she grew up, and both of them, Priscila and Vitor, had a talent for sports. She played tennis, swam, did artistic gymnastics, but she didn't like competing as much as her brother. She enjoyed the sport itself and was a good student, very intelligent, always passed with flying colors. When she was about 14 or 15, she did an exchange program in the United States, so she spoke English very well. And she had a great artistic ability too. Priscila painted very well. She studied fine arts at Parcolage, and she had this sensitivity. She was very sensitive. Besides her sensitivity, she was very affectionate. With her friends, if she knew one of them had a cold, the next day she would call, "Are you feeling better?" Her gentleness with her friends, with everyone, with her grandmother, with me, with her father, with her brother. She was very concerned about everything and everyone. In fact, in my family, her nickname was Mel, honey, because she was truly very affectionate, very, very much so. She stood out and had a very big heart. We used to do volunteer work at Cruzada San Sebastián, at Gardenia, and when we were putting together food baskets, I would buy the food. One time I was going to buy a certain brand of rice, and she said, "But we eat this brand. They should eat this brand too." That's how she was. Very, very sensitive. But when she was about 16, she started showing signs of depression, and she had a severe depression at that age. She had to take medication and everything. And I think that sensitivity she had, that concern for others, that's what made her such a special person. But when Vitor was engaged, she was so happy about his wedding, and the 2 of them were very close. So she was going through a very good time in her life. She was very happy, and she was dating. Anyway, she was at a point where she was working, dating. Vitor was married. She was happy, very happy. Well, it was at that moment that this happened. What I call a pain. A hurricane is not enough. Hurricane Katrina is not enough. A tsunami is not enough. Nothing. There are no words to describe what happens when something like this hits a family. I've always loved Rio de Janeiro because, although I was born in Minas Gerais and spent my vacations there, our family has always been very close. I've always loved Rio de Janeiro. And in my family, believe it or not, I was the only one who had ever been robbed. My parents passed away without ever being robbed. Priscila and Vitor had been mugged on the street and so on, but people get used to it and move on. But I was worried because I used to work in the same place she did, on Avenida Presidente Vargas, near Morro da Providencia. And at that time there were a lot of express kidnappings. I was very scared, so I was always worried about how she would get there. By taxi? By bus? Did she have a ride? Because there, even one of her cousins who worked at the Jornal do Comercio, they had to close the newspaper because of all the robberies. So, that worried me a little. Although she worked at the Rio Sport and Leisure Foundation, she worked with the community. But that wasn't the problem. I've always worked in community projects, and they always worked with me. In fact, Vitor had a project at Cruzada in São Sebastião in Rio de Janeiro. So, that wasn't the problem. The real problem was certain locations. And Priscila's job was near a dangerous area, unfortunately. And I think that's where something terrible in her life began. because she was working in that place, I think. At the time of the incident, we were living in Itanhanga. We had always lived in Leblon and Gavia, in the south zone of Rio de Janeiro. But then, when Vitor came back from the United States, he wanted to buy a house, so we moved to this house in Itanhanga. However, since they had grown up their whole lives, he had a very good life, even though people think Rio de Janeiro is all about partying. But no, daily life in Rio is like anywhere else. In fact, their friendships are from childhood, and the children of friends we used to date. My friends. We've been friends for over 40 years, and from school, and from the neighborhood where we lived. I lived across from Flamengo. The friends are still friends to this day, and that was a good inheritance Priscila left me. Her friends, who today I see at weddings, births, everything. They are a great support in my life, her friends, because they've been around since they were little. We call each other Auntie, because we've known each other since they were kids. Priscila had these friends. She had a social life. She was always with her friends on weekends, so she didn't adapt to living in Itanhanga, which is in the west zone, in Barra. And since her mother lived in Gavia, she had her own room there. A room with her clothes, her closet, everything, because she spent more time there. Vitor was already married and he was going to fight 10 days later, so the house was his because he came with Joanna's family, to finish the neighborhoods, and Priscila was dating, and this boyfriend was a bit jealous. Priscila went to his house, stayed there for about 10 days, and on Sunday the 31st, we went to church. She didn't go to church. She stayed with her boyfriend, the boyfriend's mother, Joanna's brother. They wanted to go, he told you, to a party on the beach at Posto 6 to see the fireworks. And I spent New Year's Eve with Joanna and Vitor at church. Well, and when that was over, because it was just like this past year, the holiday fell in the middle of the week. So, when the normal week of January started, almost no one was going to work because you could take a long weekend. So, January 9th was a Friday, and I spent that week with her at my mother's house, which was full, and she was... On Sunday, when she came over to my house, I thought she seemed a little sad, and she had even talked to Joanna's mother about trying to end the relationship. And since I was taking care of a lot of Vitor's things here in the city center, consulate, passport, I went to pick her up at my mother's house because it was easier to get to the city, and our life was normal. Priscila was studying. She was studying at Benitez. She had even taken some architecture classes because she really wanted to go to college. However, her artistic side always made her switch and go to fine arts. But since I guess Vitor hadn't given his father a diploma, and that was the family, everyone has a degree, right? Vitor became a fighter. He didn't even care about the bad stuff. Well, it was very short. He got to high school. So she was always between architecture and fine arts, always in that personal struggle of hers. She was in therapy. And also because she always had to take care of herself after her depression. And she was always on antidepressants. She never stopped. I was going out with friends, sometimes traveling, always affectionate, especially her. She was the one who took care of everything in my mother's life. The bank, the doctor, and mine too. She loved going to the supermarket, things like that. Besides being a very affectionate, loving daughter, she was a good homemaker. And always busy. Priscila not only for the family, but also for her friends, right? So, her routine was always like that. It was very easy because her friendships were always very, those friends. She was never a girl who went to funk parties, to the end. Because here there's this culture of the communities. There are parties and everyone gets together. But she never really liked it. No, it was always more about gatherings with friends, traveling to Angra, Buzios, and on that day she woke up with a lot of cramps. A lot. Around 10 o'clock she had already taken 2 postons, and she didn't want to go to work. She was feeling very sick. I said, "Honey, but your boss, you're a secretary. Almost no one is going in. Since I have to go to the city, I'll give you a ride and you can take a taxi back, or when I have to pick up the passports, I'll pick you up myself." So she went. We were talking on the way. She was asking about her relationship, and she was hesitant, talking. She really wanted to talk. And then I dropped her off there on the corner of Avenida Presidente Vargas and Avenida Pasos, so she could cross to the other side. That was the last moment. I never imagined that from then on, I would never see my daughter again. right? At least for now, until now. It's been 11 years, and that's where Priscila's story ended, right? So for me, that's something that makes me go crazy. I say that I'm falling into this abyss and I never reach the bottom. I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm always in the tunnel because I found something worse than death, being the mother of a missing person. The whole week had already been a little difficult because Priscila was hesitant to meet with her boyfriend. And they even had, because he wanted a party that she would go to, a party with him on Wednesday, with his whole family. He wanted to introduce his family to me and to the whole family, and Priscila didn't want to go. That's why I stayed at my mother's house with her the whole week, because I felt that she wasn't well in that situation, that she needed support. And on Thursday, he showed up there. They went out to talk because she didn't want to anymore, but she came back very quiet. She didn't want to talk. And then, on Friday, when she woke up sick, I didn't have a bad feeling because things were already bad, right? You know, her with these cramps, this issue with her boyfriend. So, I didn't even think I was feeling something because the situation was already bad. But when I dropped her off, I went to the city, left the passports for the dispatcher to take to the consulate. When I got home and her boyfriend calls me, "Is Priscila there?" That's what sounded strange to me. I said, "No, Lucas, the person didn't go to work. In fact, I dropped her off there. You didn't see her. You didn't see her things. You went by there." And then he called me, there was a noise here, but a strange noise. "Where are you?" He said, "I'm here at the payphone." You see, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, the payphone was still very popular, right? That's another thing that we resent in Priscila's case. That nowadays there are cameras on every corner, in every building. Back then there was nothing like that. So, that sounded strange to me, so much so that right after he hung up, I called my sister who works at Petrobras nearby and asked her to go over to where she works to see if there had been an accident. The first thing I said, "Well, I thought Priscila was hit by a car and they took her to Sousa Aguiar. And here if you drop dead, something happens. They steal everything from you. Nobody feels sorry for the dead, the run over. It's a serious problem." So, my sister came and called me. "No, Jovita. By chance nothing happened." And that day, by chance nothing happened until the end of the day. Nothing. The firefighters didn't leave the station, which is unheard of. And from then on I was constantly calling what, according to him, he went to have lunch at work. And I would say, "Lucas, Priscila didn't come back, because of course, she's not answering her desk phone because she didn't come back, right?" And I was worried. I called his house to talk to the maid to see if the person hadn't come back there, and then I started calling her friends because I thought it was strange. Because Priscila always called to see how we were doing, to say that if she was going somewhere, she always let us know, because we live in a violent city. So, both Vitor and Priscila, for example, every time Vitor was going to sleep over, do something, he always let us know. Priscila was never like that either. They all gave an explanation, which is not a lack of trust in this and that, but because in Rio de Janeiro you need that, right? And there, as the hours passed, Priscila didn't show up. She didn't even call anymore. None of her friends, which I thought was strange. They always communicated with their friends. The friends are always communicating with each other. I called Joanna. "Joanna, this is happening. This, and let's see until later tonight." Waiting for it to happen. But if not, we'll have to tell Vitor. We don't know what to do, right? And that's what happened. It started to get dark. Vitor went to my house. Then at that point, he went to the police to report that his sister hadn't come back. The friends were also worried. The friends. And then some people went to the bus station, some to the hospitals, some to drive around, and then our search began. It was when it started to get dark. I said, something happened, and I never imagined that Priscila would be disappear, because I thought, well, she was hit by a car, or she was robbed, but I was always expecting a return from that, you know? It was hard for me to believe that it would have a bigger dimension. It was when it was starting, and when it started to be 1, 2 in the morning, people I had a meeting with the mothers of some of her colleagues who were very close to me, and the colleagues each coming back from where they had been. There I saw that things were worse than I had imagined. There I felt that something very serious had happened. And unfortunately, at that time in Rio, the anti-kidnapping division was super active, because there were a lot of express kidnappings followed by death, right? So I started to get really, really nervous. Vitor too. It was very difficult. I stayed at my mother's house, which in Gavia is a much more central point, and Vitor went home with Joanna, Joanna's mother, her brother, his friends. Well, and there we saw, not just me but him too, that night, that morning, I spent a week practically taking sleeping pills. I couldn't sleep. Everyone's sleeping. My house became a camp because then, as the days passed, friends, family, my family from Belo Horizonte, from all over Brazil, everyone came here. And there came a time when everyone was asleep. I couldn't sleep even taking sleeping pills. It was a feeling like I didn't want that day to end, right? It was as if I needed, if that day didn't end, for her to come back, right? The feeling is that if I slept, it was the realization that it was happening, right? I didn't want that to be happening, so it was very difficult for me to sleep. The first night I slept was almost 7 days later. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I don't even know how I breathed, to tell you the truth. I just wanted to hear news, that someone had something. By then we were more involved with the police station. Anyway, it's very difficult. Very difficult. Vitor went to the police that same day, right? He went to report his sister's disappearance at the 14th precinct in Leblon. And the next day, or anyway, you, or Vitor, with Joanna. I don't know why someone from some TV station was already calling them to find out what had happened. That he was at the police station. Then Vitor spoke. And then it started to be on the news. And we were also very worried about Vitor because he was going to fight for the belt. And we had this idea that by doing all this, we would have a quick answer. So at home we held an event. We called several athletes, friends of Vitor's, artists. We asked if anyone had any news to report. Friday there was, Saturday and Sunday. The police had already searched the area, the city center, and there was nothing. I went to the police on Monday to make a full report on Priscila to see her last steps. Who was there, who wasn't. And on that day, when I arrived at the police station, her own friends, all wanting to help. Auntie, what can we do? How can we help? Everyone wanting to help, right? And on that day, when I arrived at the police station, it was the strangeness that gave me a strange feeling, because her boyfriend was with his father and Dr. Eunice Silva, who is one of the top criminal lawyers. That I found strange. That to this day I can't get over it because disappearance is not a crime, right? Everyone was trying to help the police to see where there might be something, right? Well, so from then on, I practically never left the police station. I would stay there to see if there was any news, anyway, to know what they were doing. It was a more comforting place for me, there inside the police station. But since on Monday, at her workplace, they had already asked for a ransom for Priscila. Her case went to the anti-kidnapping division, and in the middle of the week I also had, by then my phone was already tapped by the police. I had a ransom demand for her too, but in Bangu, and I was very good about that. I am very grateful to all the police officers who helped us, who were on the case, because they gave us, and we were obedient. Right? And we gave our phone number, even though someone managed to get our phone number inside Bangu, who called my cell phone, but it was always the police's phone from the anti-kidnapping division that was given out. And they never said anything about Priscila. Anything. So in those 2 times that it happened, they said that you ask for proof of life, because otherwise you will be a hostage of all the criminals in all of Bangu 1. And we asked for proof of life, and neither of those happened. Well, so time went by. Then we contacted the Disque Denuncia hotline to put Priscila's photo on the website. Anyway, then it started. We put up billboards in the city, which friends who could do it. So I think the billboard is a very necessary thing for the missing. There should be strategic places near bus stations, near exits, in the city center, and billboards with a picture not like Priscila's was, of Priscila. But I think there should always be a rotation, because the billboard makes people see. It's something that helps the case a lot. So people, and in the meantime, with the case getting attention, because disappearance is a bit discriminated against, and we really raised this banner of saying, disappeared. And not because people think, if they disappeared, it's because if it's a young man, it's trafficking, it's addiction. If it's older, they ran away with a lover or with who knows what. It was with whatever. And Priscila had no characteristics of being involved in anything. She really didn't. She is a woman. She was a woman. If she wanted to travel, she had already lived abroad twice. There would be no need to run away from home to meet a boyfriend for anything, because she had her own money. Anyway, in fact, her salary was never even touched. But people, when they say disappeared, they're already just measuring the police. Sometimes I've heard, "Oh, when summer is over, she'll be back. She must be in Bahia. She herself has been to Bahia." I have a cousin who lives there. Her cousin, who is a very good friend of hers, had gotten married and was living there. There's no need, right? And we really raised this banner of the missing to this day. I wear the shirt and I talk on TV because it's a social issue. The missing, because we don't just depend on the police. We depend on society. We depend on the press. We depend on the photo being there, on people not forgetting. 10 years is a lot of people. Who was a child then is now a young man, is now a man, right? And we never know where help might come from. So we always have to talk about the missing, because it's the only way, and that we saw that it was working. But it's a new line of investigation. It's a completely different investigation. The Secretary of Health, of Social Assistance. And with that, I saw that I was getting in touch with other mothers, like us, Clarice. We are orphans. We were orphans of the government, of the power, including the police. The police are free to arrest murderers, thieves, solve murders, solve car thefts, which aren't even crimes, until they get to the... because what I see today is that somehow God gives me strength not to die, because I thought, when I got in touch with Evanise and other mothers, my daughter disappeared 13 years ago, 10 years, 5 years. I said, guys, I'm not going to live through this. I'm going to die before. I can't live through this, right? It's been 11 years. God gives you strength. One holds the other's hand. And I had the grace of being able to create this missing persons unit in her name. And maybe not for her, but for the others who will come, because it doesn't stop, right? Unfortunately, it's I don't know how to say it. I know that what grows the most is the missing for human trafficking, which many people still don't believe in, for organ trafficking, for sex slaves, and murders that we see out there too. Anyway, I think God is giving me the strength to have this mission, right? But because she had depression, the psychiatrist from the anti-kidnapping division said that if she suffered some violence, because she was already more sensitive, the PT, I don't know what it's called, but he said that it's very common for a person to really forget in the face of trauma, to have a total side of who they are, where to go. And he said that this is very common in people who suffer some trauma like that. If she had suffered some trauma like that, well, so sometimes I bet on that. I have several bets, 11 years, right? After telling the truth, there have been times when I thought that she might really not be here anymore, that she was really murdered. Because Morro da Providencia was very, the kidnapping division ended the drug trafficking in Morro da Providencia, so much so that they went up there from so much reporting. Priscila's body is here, awake. Priscila is there talking. I don't know what. Anyway, it was firefighters and police, dogs, municipal guards went up Morro da Providencia a lot and found other bones, but nothing of Priscila. So, sometimes I think, but also sometimes I think that she might have had some, or suffered something, immense. I don't know. It happened because in the meantime we've had 2 cases of people who left São Paulo for work, showing up here. I don't even know how, walking, asking for a ride, without knowing, kind of disoriented. So I think that could have happened, as in several cases like that. I was in São Paulo once, and Cristina Rocha from SBT told me about cases he had seen in the hospital of people being there without knowing who they are, not even knowing how they got there. And anyway, I've had, and in my hand, a picture of people that they sent to the police, but nothing of Priscila. So much so that in Rio de Janeiro, in Minas, in Bahia, in Brasilia, in São Paulo, of a girl typing, walking around kind of disoriented. People would call the police and say, she has a girl here for what? Could it be that fighter's sister? And those girls today went home, right? So I hope, that if there's anything good in this genre, that she fell into the hands of someone good, a good family. Anyway, but also sometimes I think evil is so great. The other guy over there gets robbed, gives up his backpack, and the guy shoots him in the face. What does a person like that do, right? Although her little friends say, Auntie, Priscila is so sweet that the worst creature next to her becomes good, so I also believe that can happen, right? Anyway, it's difficult. It's very difficult. I spent 5 years inside the anti-kidnapping division, because every phone call that came in about Priscila I wanted to see. I wanted to know everything that was going on there through the disca denuncia. The people there they became very good friends of mine, my friends, and they also passed things on to me, and the only person who could speak to the veracity of that would be me. At no time, although I even thought about going after a newspaper here called Ultima Hora, because Ultima Hora said that a drug dealer was talking about Priscila who went up and all that in my word, because I knew my daughter. It's sad. To see your friends sometimes so angry, but look, you want your daughter. I get to a point where anything, whatever it was, I wanted Priscila to exist. That Priscila, any criminal love for me is worth it. There comes a time when you want anything, but it's that this daughter from wherever she comes, however she comes, whatever it was. But one of the things like that is a big surprise. It was from a psychic that Priscila on the same day was seen in the north of the country, in the south of the country. Anyway, not even the Holy Spirit was as prodigal as her because she was at the same time. The way they said it, she went up that hill. On the same day, I was on another hill of hers, in ours. She was the girlfriend of all those hills there. I've never seen it. So that got to a point where I didn't even want to know about it anymore because it was so trivialized, right? Anyway, not only did it not hurt me, but so, I can only be grateful because all the plausible and possible tips were investigated. All of them. They went to Cabo Frio. They went to several places outside to check tips. They went to the marina where they said Priscila was being held on a boat. Anyway, everything was checked as much as possible. Until we got to Linha Direita, the TV Globo show. And then we had a Fantastico, where a woman surrendered to Fantastico saying, "Look, my gang, killed Priscila Belfort over a drug debt of her boyfriend's." And in fact, in São Paulo it came out with that headline. And here there's a statement from her saying that the head of the drug trafficking thought that by taking Priscila he would make the boyfriend pay faster. Anyway, they searched the place where they said Priscila's body was. Again, nothing. They found bones, but the bones were from an animal. Then they found a skull on a motorcycle. They did the DNA. I did DNA on 2 charred bodies in Cabo Frio. DNA. But nothing. None. Nothing was Priscila's. Look, I'll tell you the truth. I wanted an answer, but when it was DNA from charred dead people, I was hoping that nothing would be Priscila's because I still hope to find my daughter. I don't know how or where, but after those cases in the United States, 3 kidnapped, 3 Kate Vidros in the same house, one 12 years old, another 11, another 10, the mothers themselves thought they were no longer alive. I think that I could be one of them in the future. Why not? And I have faith. I believe until they prove me wrong, that as people say, the missing person, you have a 70% chance of being alive, 50% chance of being dead. I'm sticking with that other 50%, but this pain is very great because you are not part of the living and you are not part of the dead, right? So it's worse than death. So I say that I walk on a cloud every day, right? Who walks on a cloud? It's a mother and a father of a missing person, because you have to balance your emotions. Because the worst of all is the day-to-day. It's waking up, not knowing where your daughter is, and it's going to sleep, not having any news. So that's brushing your teeth, thinking, my daughter, where is she? Does she have NGV? Does she have a mattress? Priscila didn't like thunder, rain. So when it rains, everyone thinks of their cousin. Well, so it's very difficult for you to vibrate with these day-to-day things. It's the worst thing there is. It's good. So it's painful, and it's very painful. I think a crutch I use, being with her friends and making an effort to live. It's more like that. I was already a Christian, me and my family, and it's in God that I find strength. It's from the Word of God that I find good things to keep me alive. So I don't go crazy, because I've seen a lot of mothers go crazy. A lot of mothers of missing people die. Why? They let the bitterness, sadness reach a point where it kills. Sadness kills. Sadness kills, and it really kills. I've seen it in several mothers of missing people dying because they couldn't take it. In fact, When I met with the groups of mothers of missing people, they asked, "How many heart attacks have you had?" I said, "None." But today I could be on that list. I've had mine. I already have 4 stents. So it's difficult because the heart, I feel it. I feel my heart contract. It seems like someone is crushing a piece of paper. I feel it. Sometimes I wake up with my heart already crushed. I'm like this. It's in the Word of God. Jesus there. Very Zinho. I listen to a lot of praise in my life. Well, and I thank God for giving me Priscila and for these 29 years that I lived with her. And then, and I also thank God for these teachings, right? In the world you will have tribulations, but be of good cheer. So, and if the person who gives me a foothold, who gives me life was crucified, right, by humans, he understood my sacrifice, my sadness. He knew what pain is, and not that I know. There are days when I even know how to live with my pain. Very difficult. I have to ask for a lot of strength and faith. It makes you want to stop that pain. I found in the struggle of the police station. I had to. There are so many holes to improve the lives of the families of missing people and easy and cheap. But the government doesn't care. This pain is only mine. Well, and I think about the other mothers who will. I want them to be at peace for what I went through, for what I go through, and these things that we can do together, as I do with Ivana and other mothers, are what lead me to walk and believe that there are still good things to be done. As I found people in this struggle who are very good, very human, and that leads me to walk, taking away, of course, my son, my grandchildren, my sister, my cousins. We are very close, my family, and not even my daughter-in-law. Well, so we grab onto these little things and we live one day after another. I just can't think about Christmas 2015, her birthday. And if someone at some point saw Priscila, someone at some point did something. So I hope for those moments. For me, they are precious. And I think it will be here, and this person has a mother. But Karen, okay, who has a little bit of a heart and will speak up. Help. So I'm waiting for that in my life. That's what you really think. That you think I'm calm deep down. Maybe you don't say it. But deep down you think something happened to him. You think something happened to her? Look, and you're going to feel super sincere. For many years, I was going to use to think that if I thought so. If she suffered some abuse, suffered a kidnapping, and the person needs a charming person, that the friends already say, Auntie, if someone did it because a person to get Priscila, that person will become good. I thought that because she was robbed in my head, that I had been robbed, and with that the person left her far away, and she traumatized me. She had a blank, right? I don't know who I am. I'm doing this here. I don't know myself, and then that. So, for years, that was the thing that I thought. And then I'm also going to have to speak. Be sincere with you. 11 years without saying that it's going to be. You lose a little of that hope. You already doubt whether your feeling is the real feeling, which is what you want to happen. So today, after 11 years, sometimes I think that she really was. It was a notorious case. The person killed, and I got more too. I'm like this year, that as for the boyfriend issue, nothing was done, seen. Because he gave 2 statements, one on Linha Direita and the other to the police. And if we meet in 10 years, you ask me everything about Priscila's case, you can say the same thing. You take everything I've already said with him, one next to the other. It's the same story, there's no other. The pure truth is that you don't forget details. But when it's a lie, you start this, you make one pension in another. You've already forgotten the detail. You do another, and that bothers me a lot, this issue of the boyfriend in the statements that we're no longer in. Well, so today, after 11 years, I don't know if I maintain that same thing, as I told you, that it was, if you had been with me 5 years ago, I would have told myself, it happened. He did this, and today I don't know. The day that dawns better, I think. So if she's alive, this must have happened. She's in someone's hands. Anyway, but there are days when no. There are days when I think she's not here anymore. It happened. It was the worst. And as we see out there, these criminals have microwaves, they have alligators, they have Rottweilers. Anyway, it's very sad. And on top of everything, we live in a country and do nothing. Because the authorities, I was in Brasilia. We were there for what minister who is already dead. She was smart. The Minister of Justice, Tomás Bastos, unfortunately, is already dead. I'm going to say he died, and no, not so many. One sound was terrible, and you did nothing. You don't have the means to know if Priscila, who was taken to the northeast, wherever, if they took her to Minas and killed her, interned her, I'll never know. It's because you don't have measures. It's just a program to unify all this data, and it can be a little expensive today. It does what will improve, what will solve the lives of so many people, which is the most important thing, but it's not done. It's not done. They're too busy with other things. And so, as sometimes we meet and talk, we're waiting for maybe a very important guy to be him missing. Then the people from above will go there. I'm going to do something. But we don't have a unified registry. The police forces don't talk to each other. There are already 23 Brazilian states, and they don't talk to each other. Nobody knows anything, unless it's through TV Globo, through Record, SBT. Other than that, we're going to have to rely on that alone. And as it was at the time of another case, along with Priscila's, he had been missing for 6 months, despite the fact that, asking for a ransom, the person paid, and then I had already paid. I had nothing. Then the case. When it was Fantastico, Priscila's case, they disappeared. Then you talked about Andre, about the characteristics, and the director of the IML of Nova Iguaçu saw it, said, "It looks like the one that passed through the IML." He was with a lot of people who were already without internet. I had 3 months, men of people. And if it hadn't been for Fantastico, the person would be sitting on the other side of the sofa, and his mother would be like me today, 11 years desperate, looking for Andre. Well, so that's it for me. A rope around my neck for a long time screaming. It's because it's difficult. Let's see now. I'm very excited for the police station, and all that's missing is the creation of it, right? Tell us now just about the creation of the state. How was it? What was your participation in this? So, these things were suffocating, and seeing the suffering of other mothers, and one thing was certain, the missing only with a specialized police station for the missing, which is a range of things that can happen, from being murdered, being in the hospital, being in a shelter, being with a homeless person, being in Turkey. Anyway, it's a child who is being sold from Paraguay to France. It's a baby who is being taken. It's so much. Only a specialized and different police station. And then I said, well, I'm going to die for this cause. Since I can't die for Priscila, I'm going to die for the cause. And then, where Meu Rio and where Rio de Paz, with the Amarildo case, began to see. But there is no police station. There are so many thousands of missing people. And what about that? It doesn't stay, because the case was within the homicide division, as it is in most of the country. So you already have a missing person. If a mother comes in, she goes into a homicide police station. It's already assumed that they died. Why look for someone who is already dead? And that's how people do it. And so I started to they gave me support from Meu Rio. It's an internet support for causes. Then we put up the cause of the missing. Rio de Paz organizes demonstrations. We started to organize demonstrations. Ana Maria Braga, Zico, my son. And I also started posting, asking for signatures. We got more than 16,000 signatures, and we got the press to also embrace the cause. That there isn't. What are we going to do? That there isn't. There has to be. And a change of government was already coming. And I said, well, the only way is for us to hang ourselves from the Christ the Redeemer. Let's tie ourselves up. We called the foreign press, and close to this event happening, and we received a call from the Secretary of Security saying that it was coming. Okay. Because in that, the Dr. Martha Rocha, she listened to me, sent a team from Belo Horizonte, that we have a very good police station in Belo Horizonte. And they say that in São Paulo it's no good either. The others don't work either. But the one in Belo Horizonte in 13 years, the same delegate, Dr. Cristina, and things worked. It was 80% of cases solved annually, and then it was a launch, a dog, money, but nothing about making this police station. And, anyway, we started to pressure the press again, but it's already gone. What has been done that won't? They said they would do it, but it doesn't happen. And then we had the word, right? The signature, the governor's signature was missing for a while. But it came out, and then this police station was created as we asked, in the best way, that we wanted it to be of excellence. It had to be different. I could just be a police station like what was actually done together with the Secretary of Human Rights, Social Assistance. Now we are closing to the Secretary of Health of Tech. In the first month, 130 people were found just in shelters who were missing only on vacation. And the fair we also, this happiness on the day of the inauguration. The family that had found their grandmother, their grandfather, gosh, it seemed like Priscilla had come home. Every case like this of coming home, the resolution is Priscilla. Well, so, we are like this with a police station here. Oh, and another thing, right? Because the mothers, poor things, their daughter was kidnapped at 9 years old, 10 years have passed. She is 19, it was the same picture. Who can afford to have a bus pass? Money for a bus pass to be every week Sousa, to do the hospital rounds, that doesn't exist. No human being can stand it. So, all of this today the police station does. Well, so, I believe that this model will also be so successful that it will be identified in this country. But it's missing. The union of everyone is missing. The single registry of dead people, living people, of this, a baby who left Rio de Janeiro will be caught there in Espirito Santo. I don't know where, so that's easy. You just have to make a program. It can be expensive. I understand. In bulk. How much does a life cost? How much does a case like this solved cost? How much? I would like these governors, these ministers to tell me, how much does a life cost? So if you think that in our Constitution the greatest good is life, I can say that life is costing a straight line, right? It's very happy. It's something that gives me a lot of energy today to continue living. That I wake up from a dream that still needs to improve. There's a lot to be done. This is the initial kickoff, and now the fight for unification. If Priscilla was taken to the north, south, east, west, I have to know if she was hospitalized. I have to know because it can't be like this.